Some of Hollywood's most powerful families have spent decades building names worth millions, sometimes billions. From the outside, being born into one of these families looks like winning the lottery. Money, connections, opportunity. A famous name before you've accomplished anything yourself. But behind some of those names are family realities that look very different once the cameras stop rolling. Children who grew up under pressures they never chose. Private relationships that eventually became public. And problems that didn't disappear when one generation handed the family name to the next. Look closely enough at these families, and the same disturbing pattern starts to emerge. A pattern that has almost nothing to do with how much money they have. And perhaps no modern Hollywood family reveals it more clearly than the Smiths. The family that talked its way into a different image. Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith spent over 2 decades as one of Hollywood's most closely watched families. Will, one of the most beloved movie stars in the world? Jada, a working actress and entrepreneur in her own right. Both of them publicly describing their marriage as an unconventional partnership built on values they discussed openly for years. Then, gradually, their own words complicated that image. In 2018, the Smiths launched Red Table Talk, built around candid family conversations hosted by Jada, alongside her mother and daughter, Willow. In 2020, Jada disclosed on the show that she had been in a relationship with musician August Alsina during a period when she and Will were living separately. A disclosure Will discussed with her directly on camera, in an episode that became one of the most watched in the show's run. It wasn't outsiders who dismantled the Smiths' public image. It was the family itself, choosing, repeatedly, to speak more openly than almost any comparable Hollywood family ever had.
Take our space, and what happened?
Yeah, and then I got into an entanglement with August. That's what I said. You and I were also going through a process of healing in a much different manner.
That openness is also where the generational split becomes visible. Will and Jada built the modern version of the Smith name. The marriage, the brand, the candor. Jaden and Willow inherited it, along with every expectation that came attached. Willow, at 17, told Girl Gaze magazine that navigating fame while trying to figure out her own identity had been, in her words, absolutely, excruciatingly terrible, adding that the only way through it was to go directly into it, because you can't change your face. One generation built the image. The next generation is still living inside what that image demanded of them. Decades earlier, another set of children didn't inherit a dynasty. They built one, with their own hands, before they were old enough to understand what it would eventually cost them. The children who built what they would later be judged by. Joe Jackson formed the Jackson 5 out of his own children in Gary, Indiana, in the early 1960s. According to multiple accounts from members of the Jackson family, the discipline he imposed to get them there was severe. Michael Jackson spoke publicly, more than once, about physical punishment during rehearsals as a child, and described a childhood built around work rather than play. His siblings, Jermaine, LaToya, and Marlon, gave corroborating accounts in their own interviews and memoirs over the following decades. Joe Jackson publicly defended his disciplinary methods for years. This is the generation that built the Jackson dynasty not through inheritance, but through labor, before any of them were old enough to consent to the terms.
Continued to go in the studio, I was more relaxed, and now I can understand and know that you really don't know what you can do until you try it out.
By the time Michael became the biggest solo star in the world, the Jackson name had already transformed into something much larger than any one member of the family. It became a brand, an institution, and eventually a legacy that later generations of Jacksons would inherit, without ever having built it themselves. What did that first generation give up to create one of the greatest entertainment dynasties in history? By the documented accounts of the people who actually lived it, the answer includes a childhood that looked nothing like the joy the world watched performed on stage. This is what dark means across this documentary. Not that every family hides an equivalent scandal, but that every family carries hidden costs, pressures, and complications the public rarely sees. Some celebrity children build the name that later generations inherit. Others are simply born already carrying a name that became famous before they existed. Famous at 7, alone at 14. Drew Barrymore didn't simply become a child star. She entered an industry her family had already occupied for 3 generations. Her grandfather, John Barrymore, among the most celebrated stage and screen actors of his era. Her father, John Drew Barrymore, also an actor. When Drew was cast in E.T. the Extraterrestrial at age 7, she wasn't arriving in Hollywood. She was inheriting a family trade. What that inheritance actually looked like, in her own words, is stark. In her 1990 memoir Little Girl Lost, written when she was 16, Barrymore described starting to drink at 9, smoking regularly by 10, and using by 12. She entered a rehabilitation facility at 13 and spent 18 months in treatment. In a 2015 interview with The Guardian, she said she really was alone during that period and that it felt terrible. The facility that treated her ultimately recommended legal emancipation from her mother, Jade, as part of her recovery. Barrymore pursued it and was declared legally independent at 14. She has since written a second memoir, Wildflower, and discussed the period repeatedly and candidly in interviews across her career, including a 2023 blog post describing the experience as the moment the umbilical cord was severed. The Barrymore name opened Hollywood's doors before she was old enough to understand what walking through them would cost. It gave her extraordinary access. It did not give her stability or protection those, by her own account, she had to build for herself, essentially becoming, in her words, her own parent at 14. When privacy became the family business. The Barrymores inherited fame passively across generations. Kris Jenner's generation did something different. They built fame itself into a commercial enterprise, with the family's own intimacy as the primary product. Keeping Up with the Kardashians, which premiered in 2007, turned private relationships, conflicts, and milestones into ongoing entertainment content watched by millions of people every week for over a decade. Kris Jenner has been widely credited, by media analysts and family members alike, as the architect of that transformation.
Did I already say this morning I didn't care to do it? Then don't be in it.
You are annoying, Courtney. You're being annoying.
Why? Because Kim wants it around her schedule?
What that model cost is worth sitting with directly. Arguments that would otherwise stay private became storylines. Personal milestones became content. Individual family members built independent business empires from the visibility the show generated, but the visibility itself depended on giving up the kind of privacy most families take for granted. That generation, Kris, and the siblings who came of age alongside the original show built the commercial empire. The newest generation of the family is now growing up entirely inside an already established reality television, social media, and celebrity ecosystem. With public attention present from early childhood, in a way none of their parents actually experienced until they were adults choosing to opt in. What happens when the most valuable thing a family owns is public access to the family itself? The Kardashians answered that question more directly and more profitably than any celebrity family before them. But it also means the newest generation inherited something the earlier generation chose, a public life they never opted into themselves. The daughter who inherited the pressure first. Whitney Houston's rise in the 1980s redefined what commercial success in pop and R&B could sound like, built on a musical lineage that included her mother, Cissy Houston, and her cousin, Dionne Warwick. The expectations attached to that rise were enormous from the beginning. Bobbi Kristina Brown was born into that environment as Whitney's only child. At 8 months old, she appeared on camera with her parents during a 1993 Barbara Walters special, the camera zooming in on her in her crib. A year later, at the 1994 American Music Awards, Whitney carried her on stage during an acceptance speech, telling the audience, "I couldn't leave her." She started crying, while gently telling her daughter not to grab the microphone. She was a public figure before she could walk. As a teenager, she pursued her own creative ambitions in music and film, often discussed publicly in direct relation to her mother's legacy rather than on her own terms. But the most revealing part of what Bobbi Kristina inherited may be what she carried long before tragedy entered the picture at all. An extraordinary name she never chose, fame she did not create for herself, public expectation that began in infancy, and a family history that was already complicated before she was old enough to understand any of it. Some children inherit fame. Some inherit expectation. Bobby Christina inherited both, simultaneously, from the moment she was born years before anything else about her life became public. Elvis built it. Lisa Marie inherited it. Riley inherited what was left. Elvis Presley built one of the most transformative legacies in 20th century culture, and Graceland, his Memphis home, eventually became something closer to a national institution than a private residence. Lisa Marie Presley was his only child, born in 1968, and she inherited that legacy, directly carrying the Presley name for her entire life as both privilege and, by her own account in later interviews, considerable weight. When she died in January 2023, at age 54, what she had inherited passed down again, this time to her own daughter, actress Riley Keough.
Riley Keough opens up about the status of her relationship with her grandmother, Priscilla Presley, after Riley was named the sole trustee of her late mom, Lisa Marie Presley's estate.
What Riley inherited wasn't just Graceland. It was responsibility for defending it. Her grandmother, Priscilla Presley, challenged the validity of a 2016 trust amendment naming Riley as primary heir. The two settled in 2023, with Priscilla receiving a payment and stepping down as trustee. The following year, a company calling itself Nosany Investments attempted to force Graceland into foreclosure, using what Riley's legal team called fraudulent loan documents. A judge blocked the sale. Across 3 generations, the same institution has never simply belonged to whoever holds it. Elvis built it, Lisa Marie inherited it, and carried its weight for the rest of her life. Riley inherited what remained. 2 very different legal battles emerged after the responsibility for the Presley estate passed to her first, a trust dispute with her grandmother in 2023, then a separate, fraudulent attempt to force Graceland into foreclosure in 2024, neither of which she chose. It's difficult to fully separate the privilege of inheriting a legacy this large from the complications that come bundled directly inside it. Builders and inheritors. Here's the pattern. Someone builds. Someone else inherits what was built, the money, but also the expectations, the pressure, and the consequences of decisions they never made themselves. Will and Jada built. Jaden and Willow inherited. Michael and his siblings built, at enormous personal cost. Drew inherited fame across 4 generations of Barrymores, without inheriting the stability to carry it. Kris Jenner's generation built an empire. The newest Kardashians are growing up entirely inside it. Bobby Christina inherited pressure before she ever had the chance to build anything herself. And the Presleys show the whole pattern in one family, across 3 generations. Built, inherited, inherited again. The inheritance nobody gets to decline. From the outside, being born into any of these families looks like winning a kind of lottery most people never enter. Money, connections, opportunity. A name powerful enough to open doors before you've accomplished a single thing yourself. But nobody actually chooses the family they're born into.
And what happened?
Yeah, and then I got into an entanglement with August. That's what I said.
Did I already say this morning I didn't care to do it? Don't be in it.
Grandmother Priscilla Presley, after Riley was named the sole trustee of her late mom, Lisa Marie Presley's estate.
That's the real dark secret sitting underneath every celebrity dynasty this documentary has covered. It was never one hidden scandal shared by all 6 families. It's simpler and harder to escape than that. Every generation inherits the consequences of what the previous generation built, the privileges and the complications, arriving together, impossible to fully separate. You don't just inherit the name. You inherit everything that came with it. So here is the question we want you to answer. Which celebrity family do you think has struggled the most with the weight of its own legacy? Let us know your answer in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more upcoming videos just like this one.